Good morning, and thank you for attending today's webinar. My name is Mike Wells. I'm a resource advisor with Atticus. Today we're going to be discussing the 7 traps that stop lawyers from growing revenue. It'll be presented by Practice Advisor Steve Riley and Practice Advisor David Phelps. Before we begin, there are a few logistical items that we'll go over here. First of all, how to ask questions. There are a couple of ways to do that. You can use the chat function on your GoToWebinar dashboard to send a message to the event organizer. That's me. If you would like your question to remain anonymous, please indicate so in your message. And also, you can click the hand icon to indicate that you have a question or comment. And during the portion of this broadcast toward the end, we'll call on you and unmute you so that you can speak up and be heard by everyone. So the first question we usually get is, will this be recorded? And yes, we are recording today's session. And after the session is over, we'll be processing the video and uploading it to our YouTube channel. I'd like to tell you a little bit about today's presenters. Steve Riley has been a practicing attorney for well over 25 years. He also is a pretty well-known national speaker and coach to attorneys for over 20 years as well. His practice concepts have been utilized by many different legal organizations, and he's asked to speak all over the country by various legal groups, bar associations, and private firms. David Phelps is another practice advisor with Atticus. He has spent over 18 years as a top marketing executive, is very knowledgeable about the ins and outs of marketing your business and your law firm. Without further ado, I'd like to have Steve step in and take over the broadcast.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks. And David, welcome to the webinar. Welcome everyone to the webinar. Good morning. I hope you're doing great. We really have 2 primary intentions for this webinar. The first intention is to walk through the 7 key traps that we see that get in the way of lawyers growing their revenue and growing their practices and really building a practice of dreams. Over the last 25 years, our company has worked in the solo and small firm market. So we typically see these traps over and over and over. So we'll walk through the trap and we'll give you some recommendations of how to avoid the traps. Then number 2 is that we're going to talk to you at the end of the presentation about a workshop that we teach around the country. We usually do it 2 to 3 times a year called Double Your Revenue, which is really focused on thinking in a big picture way about taking your firm's revenue to 2 times what it is today, hence the name, the Double Your Revenue Workshop. So it's really for those of you who are like, oh wow, in addition to the 7 traps, I really want to go bigger with my firm. I want to grow, and you have a growth mindset. This would be a workshop for you to kind of check out and see if it's something that will allow you access to what's next for you in your practice. With that, let's jump into trap number 1. Trap number 1 is failing to make the time to think and work on your practice. It's tough. We've all been there, and if you're growing your practice to a decent level, you might be working in what I call a crisis-driven practice, or whatever the crisis stage is from your clients, especially if you're a litigator, you are in a position where you're just having to swing at whatever ball being thrown at you that day, and maybe multiple balls. Number 2 is if you're not marketing and pricing well, you have a sense of chasing cash flow. So you'll feel like, man, I need a little bit more money to make payroll this month, or I need a little bit more money to match my retirement savings, or I need a little bit more money to start a marketing campaign, but you're always got this sense where you're never feeling like you're caught up. And number 3 is you're time starved. There's very few lawyers that we know that aren't feeling intense time pressure. So we completely understand that it's a challenge to think about your practice and work on your practice when you're dealing with a crisis-driven practice, chasing cash flow and feeling time-starved. It's a really big challenge. Recommendation is to work out of that trap very simply and very slowly. You have to invest the time in your practice to think, strategize, and act. Our recommendation is to at least budget 1 day per quarter, a minimum. Now, if you're not at a point in your practice where you like, see if I can protect entire day, then I would suggest you try and protect 2 hours a week. And if you can protect 2 hours a week, my suggestion is at least do a 15-minute daily improvement sprint where you can look at, say, okay, for 15 minutes today, I'm going to fix this process, or for 15 minutes today, I'm going to fix this thing in my engagement letters, or for 15 minutes today, I'm going to work on my intake process. But just taking a 15-minute protected sprint as a way of trying to get some improvement going on in your practice. One of the challenges, and I see this over and over and over, and David and I have talked about this before the call, that we see lawyers just practice the same way for 10 to 15 years because they never have enough time to get off the treadmill to fix the practice. They just have to run as fast as they can. So that's trap number one. The only way that you can stop that treadmill-like feeling is that you have to invest the time in your practice to think, strategize, and act. Now, as we go through the other traps, the other 6 traps, these are also the strategies to solve those traps can also be used by you to free up more time to invest in your practice. David, before I go to trap number 2, is there anything that you want to add to
that? No, it's just the mindset of the term we use of working on your business as opposed to in your business comes to mind here. Being mindful, being able to do both of those is certainly very critical. If you're not doing that, not thinking bigger picture, the business isn't going to grow and you won't achieve the results one's looking for.
Perfect. So trap number 2. Is not establishing a minimum case value. This is a big one. If you're trying to think about how to grow a practice, you really need to understand that there is a key strategy to establishing the minimum threshold of type of case that you'll take. Most lawyers, if they know how to technically do a case, like they understand the law behind the case, they'll take it even though it may seem simple to them. Or even though they say, well, it's a simple case, I can do it, but they don't think about the profitability of the case. And sometimes what's worse is where we see a lot of lawyers get in trouble is that they don't know actually how to do a case, but they need the money. They'll take the case and learn how to do the case, which usually means it's going to be even less profitable because if they don't understand that area of the law, they didn't price it right. And if they didn't price it right, then they lose money on the case because they're kind of learning the case while they do it. Now, I'm okay if you're growing a particular area, knowing that you'll lose some, perhaps lose some money on a few cases to learn that area. But it is a big challenge if you don't start establishing what is my minimum threshold for cases. The recommendation for us, from our perspective, is to start slowly over time to upgrade your case values. The quickest way to start this process is to create a minimum case threshold. And there's probably 3 or 4 ways that you can support yourself in doing that. So for example, depending on where you're at in your practice, depending on the type of practice that you have, your minimum case threshold may be a small one where you start with minimally saying, I won't take any case that doesn't generate at least $3,000 in revenue. If it doesn't going to generate $3,000 revenue, I'm not going to open a file. Or you may be at a point in your career where if you're a contingency fee player, you say, well, if I can't generate $30,000 in contingency fees off of a case, I shouldn't take it because it's clogging up my pipeline. I'm spending too many resources and too much staff processing this case, which is really a important way of thinking about the practice because it starts to allow you to establish, wow, when I look at it, I need to upgrade not only the value of my cases and clients, but I also need to upgrade the value of my referral sources and marketing. So one of the things that we also recommend is to start to rank your cases, your clients through a scorecard. And I'll give you an example of the scorecard briefly here. David, would you like to talk about the scorecard for a second?
Yeah, I'd be happy to, Steve. So implementing something like this, a scorecard type of system into your client intake process, it really has got tremendous value for you. The particular example we have on the screen is fairly generic or basic of some of the objective criteria or parameters that we're looking to establish and be able to score potential clients based on some different characteristics that they're going to present during the intake process. So as I said, the criteria here are some fairly fundamental and basic ones, such as, can the client afford to pay my retainer, or what's the referral source? There's any number of objective criteria that will allow you to then, in a weighted fashion, be able to score and assess potential clients more effectively. Now, we have some very specific practice-driven ones. There's obviously a personal injury practice, very different from an estate planning practice, and the criteria that one is looking at varies. So, we do get very specific. We probably have 10 or more of these built specifically for different practice areas. But to just give everybody on the call sort of a general sense. So in using this scorecard, the idea is to get you to transition from choosing clients based more on gut feel, what you see and what you hear, to something that's more objective in a scoring system. And that allows you to assess and categorize them as being either A, B, C, or D. The idea with that, obviously, is that, in using a system like this, you can identify the A's and B's, better identify them up front, and obviously you take those, and then the C's and D's, you may refer out, or you may just decline them. So that's the client intake matrix. I'd say that, the interesting thing about utilizing a system like this is you're going to start to notice you have an ideal case type. You're going to be keenly aware of the characteristics of what your A and B clients are showing you. Knowing those will then allow you to better go back, and this is where the marketing piece comes in. You can then go back and better educate your referral sources on those characteristics of the types of clients you're looking for. And that obviously is going to lead you to higher level, more profitable clients. The other interesting thing, and I know, Steve, you see this, is lawyers can then learn to focus on their best and most profitable cases, and better do so, and be able to significantly reduce incomes. So, Steve, I don't know if you have anything to add there, but
no, that's perfect, David. The idea is, let's just say in 2016 you may have 28 cases. Your goal then by 2017 is maybe you have 38 cases, so you're starting to upgrade over time. The key to getting A cases versus D cases is being aware of them when they come in, and it really makes a huge difference to actually go through this process. And what our experience is, working and consulting with law firms around the country, currently we work with about 400 law firms around the country, the really big impact player on this process is usually going to be your paralegal or your key assistant helping you fill this form out, because they will quickly tell you who your A's and your B's and your C's and D's are. So what we'll learn over time is that we'll just start passing on the D's and focusing more with a referral source on what an A client looks like. And it'll really improve your marketing and sharpen your skills. The other two things about this is be clear on your case value or average revenue per case. So if you took on 100 cases last year and you know what your revenue was, you can divide your revenue by case, and it gives you an average case value, which is a great benchmark to look at. My suggestion is to do the ABCD client matrix and try it for 90 days and see what you start to learn about your referral sources and your practice. Now, if you want this worksheet, David, you're fine if they email you and request it, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. They certainly can. It's David P, like Paul, David P at atticusonline.com.
And we'll have his email for you towards the end, so you can also see it up on the screen and request it that way. Trap number 3, so terrific, thank you, David. Trap number 3. It's a huge one. This is a big one. Failing to protect yourself from burnout. It's your practice. You're the golden goose of practice, and you're paid well to solve problems. You're paid well to use your judgment. And the experience that we have is that lawyers, especially the type of lawyers that we work with, have tremendous work ethics. They're really committed to solving their clients' problems. And they think the only solution is to work harder and faster. And my experience is if you work harder and faster, it's not going to solve your burnout or the risk of burnout. Ignoring it won't solve it. So putting your head in the sand and saying, okay, I've been working really hard for 2 years and I've only had 3 or 4 weekends off, or only had a week of vacation off. And when I say a week of vacation, I mean emails and phone calls. Hoping it gets better won't solve it. And working harder and longer won't solve burnout. So the only ways that we've learned over the past 25 years to protect yourself from burnout is to take a massive step back. And first and foremost, look at what you can do to protect your physical health. Your physical health is so critical because if we don't take good care of you, as your practice grows and you age, your physical health becomes a greater risk. So right when your mental judgment and your experience and your professional skills are peaking, if you haven't taken good care of yourself physically, you're declining quicker and quicker as age sets in. So you want to look at this as a long-term game, a long-term marathon, and your physical health is so crucial to that. I don't care if you look like an Adonis or, we're not expecting you to run a marathon. We're expecting you to take good care of yourself so that you can stay on top of your mental game. Number two is you want to protect your mental health. A lot of lawyers that we know have what we call I used to kind of life. I used to sail. I used to golf. I used to take time off to spend with my family. My wife and I used to take trips. And these used to things are really important to mental health and good emotional health so you can be a really good lawyer. And number three is we see lawyers sacrifice their most important relationships, their children, their family, because the practice is a demanding monster of your time. And you are ultimately the owner of your future. You're the owner of your time. If you don't protect those relationships, no one else will. So my experience is that in order to protect burnout, you're going to have to take steps to take care of yourself, start looking how you protect your mental health, and focus on the most important relationships. We have study after study after study that supports this, that the greatest way of protecting burnout is to take really great care of you. And you're the golden goose. If the golden goose goes down, what happens to the practice? Trap 4, fail to plan and train for strategic delegation. Let me walk you through this one because this one's a little bit complicated. First, you want to understand the difference when we say strategic delegation versus tactical delegation. Tactical delegation is usually a task or a project that you're handing off to an associate, paralegal, a legal assistant. You're saying, please go draft this and file it, or go draft this and bring it back to me, or go make this phone call. Strategic is a system, process, or department. So instead of saying, go draft this and file it, you're saying you're now in charge of the drafting, the filing of this process. That person now takes over that department, that process or system. My experience is a lot of lawyers are really training their staff by default, and they're not training them systemically. It's a huge mistake. Most of us were trained by trial by fire. I know I was when I was a young lawyer. The firm I worked for, I got sworn in. The week I got sworn in, I was second chairing a jury trial, and for the love of God, the partner I reported to screwed up. In the morning of the trial, he found out that he had a half-a-day bench trial scheduled an hour away, handed me a file and told me I needed to drive and be there in 45 minutes. It was an hour-and-a-half drive to handle the trial. So that was how I was trained as a young lawyer, where there was no systems, no process. It was just one fire after another fire after another fire. Well, we're all trained like that. We think this is how we should train our support team. That's how we should train our associates. Our recommendation is not to do it that way. It's terrible. It's terrible to them, it's terrible to you, and it's not profitable. So if you're looking at growing your practice, you want to think about how to strategically delegate versus tactically delegate. So my recommendation and David's recommendation is over the next 90 days, select one component of your practice, and I would select a small component that you can strategically delegate to someone. And it may not work the first time, so you want to learn and study why. Most of the time, in my experience, it's really probably the real issue behind why your practice is not growing, and most of the time it's the lawyer's inability to think through how to train, how to systemically delegate, not tactically, but systemically delegate, and be patient with people as they learn this process. If you've not empowered and trained someone before, and you're just one of these what I call drive-by delegators, where you're running off to a hearing or you're doing something, you throw something at your staff and you run out the door, the first time you sit down and try and systemically train them, it will freak them out. They won't know what's going on. They'll actually get nervous. So you want to approach this with a little bit of patience and a little bit of thought, pretty much like you're going to a hearing or a trial or a depot. You want to do a little bit of work before you start to do a systemic strategic delegation. David, anything you want to add to this before I move to trap 5?
No, I think that was well stated, Steve.
Thank you. Trap 5, pricing too low and staying there. What do I mean by that? We have seen lawyers set a hourly rate or fixed rate and stay there for a long, long time, meaning that once they set their rates and people are willing, and clients are willing, and institutions are willing to pay for it, they stay there and don't raise their rates. Number 2 is not teaching support team, associates, and other bill producers how to be more effective. My experience is that if you've been doing this for 5 to 10 to 15 years, you have some experience on how to bill, how to communicate. When I was a managing partner, I called it the GAR method, G-A-R for goal, action, result. I told my associate attorneys, don't bring me a bill and don't send a bill to a client that doesn't address the GAR. What was the goal of the call? What was the goal of the action? And what was the result of what you did? Don't put PC with client. The PC with client regarding the client's goal, what action came out of the call, and what were the results produced out of the call. My experience is that so many lawyers are so busy, they're not taking the time to train and groom their team to communicate with them. So here's our recommendations. When it comes to pricing, I want to encourage a gentle raising of your rates. So we're not saying double your rates immediately. We're saying encourage a raising of your rates over time with new entry of new clients. And think about strategically, how do we raise our rates? Most of the lawyers we work with, it's not surprising to me that they have not raised their rates in 3 to 5 to 10 years. They've kept the rates pretty much the same, which is crazy because I don't know about you guys, my health insurance doubled. My salaries have increased, my rent's increased, but so we have to make sure that we're raising our rates to maintain a decent level of profitability in our practice. Otherwise, with the expenses increasing, your income gets squeezed, and most lawyers just work more, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever to make up the lack of profitability. Number 2, ignore your peers. This is really, really tough, and it's really hard to say, especially on a webinar, and I can't see your faces. But in my experience, when I go to a bar conference and I talk to other lawyers about what they charge and I hear what they're charging, I learned that it really doesn't matter, because us looking what other lawyers are doing is really something we're doing to build our confidence. Ultimately, whose opinion matters when we set our rates? The client, the prospect. What other lawyers charge doesn't matter, and there's 3 reasons I want you to consider when you hear other lawyers talk about their rates. Number 1 is that they're lying to you. What I mean by that is that when you talk to another lawyer at a cocktail hour and you're saying, so what do you charge? They're going to lie to you because they look good. They don't want to look bad to you. So they may not quite tell you the truth about what they actually really charge. Number 2, what they say they charge and what they collect is a whole different ballgame. So you may want to ask them about what their effective hourly rate is versus what their hourly rate is. So we know lawyers that say, well, my hourly rate's $500 an hour. But if they're a family law firm and they're only collecting 50% of that $500, then their effective hourly rate's $250, not $500. So we want to tell the truth about that. What's the actual effective hourly rate? And number 3, sometimes lawyers get into this really weird thing where they look over and go, wow, David Phelps is a really smart guy. And I'm not as smart as David, so I should charge $25 an hour less than David, which makes no sense whatsoever. Because really what should drive your pricing in the your hourly shop is what your clients say about your rates and what your clients feel about your rates and how you explain it to your clients. That's really what matters. So talking about other lawyers is a red herring. It's a trap. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever when you start to think of it, because it's not an effective market study. David, anything you want to add
Yes, there's probably some attorneys on the call that may be thinking this. Someone's not necessarily going to state it out loud, but I'll raise one concern, because I've had this conversation with many clients, and the concern about the recommendation to raise rates that's been expressed to me is, well, what if I do that and I lose business? I don't want to, be perceived to be charging too much, and if I send out a letter that I'm raising my rates, I'm going to lose clients. You can speak to your experience, Steve. What I've seen with clients that put a rate increase in, funny what occurs, because this is sort of a marketing issue, is 95% of the time there's no issue at all. You get no feedback one way or the other. The clients pay the higher rate. 5% or less of the time you might get a little bit of pushback or complaint with a client, but in my experience, those are C&D clients. Almost every case, they're going to be the lower level clients, the clients you may not, should have taken in the first place. So the concern about the pushback or losing business, with many clients that I've worked with, it's just for the most part unfounded. I don't know if your experience bears that out as well.
No, I think you nailed it. It's, for me, it's and I've been there. I remember the first time I raised rates, and I was stressed, and I was really sweating and worried about it, and it was a non-issue with my clients. My experience is that you've got to lawyers do really funny things here. So in an hourly rate practice, I usually, my experience is the same as yours. About 5% of clients will get a little bit of pushback, 95% won't. The second thing, on a fixed price shop, where you have like a guy that charges fixed prices for something like a flat rate firm, they if they go very aggressively, their closing rate drops. So, but here's the funny thing about this. So if you have a firm that doubles their fees and their closing rate drops, they're making the same amount of revenue with half the cost. So the profitability goes up by 50%. So, and it's emotionally very hard, because the lawyers are like, well, my closing rate drops. And I'm like, I really don't care about your closing rates. What I really care about is your profitability. And the lawyers get they always get all self, you see this on listserv I speak to, across the country. I have lawyers go, my closing rate's really high. And I'm like, well, that's great. That means we need to raise your prices, because that means you're taking cases at a low price point. So if you do things below market, your closing rate should be really high. It should be through the roof. I'd rather have you in a gentle 65 to 75% closing rate at a really good price point than 100% closing rate at a low price point, because you have to have more staff to process less profitable work. So it's really hard to understand until you start to do the math, and then it becomes so obvious. But with that, let's go to trap number 6. So number 6, this is not having a referral-based marketing strategy. And David, I'm going to talk about the challenge, and I'm going to ask you to talk about the recommendations. So if you're too busy to think, if you're running around like a crazy person, you're too busy to think, then you are usually too busy to market. If you're too busy to market, then you'll never be able to strategically and systematically upgrade your clients. And if you can't upgrade your clients, your costs are continuing to climb, and then you're going to have a really big problem. And you may be experiencing that now. You might be feeling very commoditized. You might be feeling a lot of fee pressure, and it's because that you're not thinking, not planning, not marketing, and you're not building a practice systemically. You're building it by the seat of your pants. And that's okay to go for a while, but after a while, that just is going to lead to burnout. So David, why don't you talk for a minute for recommendations around marketing, because you're really tremendous in this area.
Okay, yeah, happy to. So the idea first, when I work with any client is put together a simple list to identify, who are these folks that you want to connect to drive more of this, highly sought after referred business. You really, second bullet here, we're going to suggest you put together 2 lists. One is current referrers. I would suggest everybody on the call, if you haven't already, out of your accounting system, time and billing system, generate a report showing where did your work come from in the last year. Do a list of your top referrers by either revenue or number of matters. That's where I'd start. And if you don't have the ability or don't track this information, we probably need to talk further. You should be able to produce a list of your top referrers or your top cases. Where did they come from? So that's where your target first lies. Those are folks that have referred you work, and you want to make sure you're engaging them, talking to them, maintaining top-of-mind awareness, asking for referrals, on and on and on and on. So that's the one list. The second list is the ones, those individuals that you want to send great work. It can be lawyers, can be former clients, can be any number of people in your network, but you want to identify a list of prospective referrers, people that you want to engage with on either in a group setting or a one-on-one basis in the next year. Put that list together, rank, how good of a potential referral source they really are. There's a number of metrics you want to look at, but just the simple act of putting together those two lists and having your marketing activity be driven, at least partially, by the individuals on that list, certainly very important. And then beyond that, be a little bit creative. Think of some things you can do, to engage people. Put together a list of some fun things you could do. Let's take a look at the next slide.
The other thing on the bottom there, David, I want to point out is
Yeah.
To ask for work, because the studies that we've done show that if you actually, it's one thing to go out and do what I call bumper car marketing, where you're bumping into people and talking to them. You can actually practice how to ethically and comfortably. The key is practice ethically and comfortably asking for work. And for fun, we have two examples here. The first example is what I call the board request for work. And so the board request is, Dan, I'm bored out of my mind. Do you have any great cases we can work on together? Which is a fun way of asking for work. But, not saying, hey, I'm desperate for work, please send me work. I'm the board request. The other one is a fun request, and I've used this one a lot when I was practicing. Patty, I've had a lot of fun working on cases with you. You got any cases that you and I can work on together that are fun? So my experience is, in our studies show that if you actually ask for referrals, you will get the referrals. The lawyers that ask increase their business by 50% versus the ones that go out there and bump into clients and bump into referral sources and not ask. So good, terrific. So let's do trap 7. No plan to deal with change. And this is kind of a big picture conversation, and there's 2 or 3 components to this. First, we know that the legal industry is changing quickly. The amount of large law firms have fallen apart. It's really remarkable to see in the past 5 to 10 years. The amount of solo practitioners out there are growing. In 2012, 2011, 2012, the amount of lawyers getting jobs out of law school were record lows. 1 out of 2 graduates could find a job, and that glut still hasn't been absorbed. So there's definitely an overabundance of lawyers in the marketplace. Definitely a real squeeze by companies that are non-regulated companies like LegalZoom, that are putting a squeeze on certain elements of the practice, which is making other lawyers go into other areas. We're seeing this a lot. So it's changing, and the truth is change is something no one likes unless someone else is doing it. This is my experience. So if you're saying you should change, I'm okay, that's generally what most people do. And so no one really likes change, and they really don't like to deal with change. And if you think about how your brain is designed to work, your brain's really designed to keep you alive. It's not designed for change. So it doesn't like change. So anything that looks like change is stressful. And then we have time is feeling like it's speeding up. A lot of lawyers are saying, it was great 10 years ago when I only had to deal with fax and overnight. Now I have email, Twitter, Facebook. My clients want instant access all the time. So the speed by which information is hitting you is grown dramatically. And a lot of lawyers haven't thought through, how do I deal with that change? In addition to that, let's say you do want to make a change. You say, okay, I want to make a change in my practice. The desire to make a change is insufficient. Like I said, for the past 25 years, we've worked with high-performing lawyers, and we have a change formula. If you're not driving, if you're in front of the screen or in front of the desk, or maybe you're shopping on Amazon, close Amazon and look at the screen for a moment. Because right now, these are the three key elements to implement change, whether it's in your life, in your firm, with your staff. If you do not have these three things together, change will not occur. And I've studied this. I've read everything there is on implementing change. I've read about every book and every study on leadership and management implementing change, and it boils down to these three core concepts. Number one, a compelling reason to make a change. If somebody doesn't have a good enough reason to make a change, they won't do it. We see this very consistently with lawyers that are above the age of 55, maybe 60, and they have young associates, and the young associates want to invest into infrastructure, invest into marketing. The older managing partner, the older lawyer's like, yeah, no, I'm not doing that. And he'll never say why. And the main reason is because he's already retired. He hasn't told them the date yet of his retirement. So he's squeezing every penny he can out of that practice. He's maximizing his income, maximizing his benefits. His compelling reason, he's on the way out. He doesn't have a compelling reason to grow. So if you don't have a compelling reason that lines up with your change formula, you're not going to get the change you're seeking, bottom line. Two, accountability and follow-up structure. A phenomenal amount of studies and resources out here that support the following thing. If you go to a workshop or you attend a webinar like this and you go, wow, that's really great information, I want to implement some changes. If you don't have an accountability and follow-up structure, it will the studies show that 98% of the time the idea will fail. 2% of the time it will be successful, and it's usually out of a very determined person who's not going to let go. But 98% of the time, without an accountability and follow-up structure, it will fail. And you can see this. You can see this in your own life. You can see this with your staff. If you walk in and tell your paralegal or your associate or somebody, do it this way from now on, if you don't follow up and you don't have accountability structure, they'll go back to doing how they did it before. If without accountability and follow-up structure, change will not occur. And number three is without strategy and coaching. Strategy and coaching provides people a pathway and a plan, and coaching gives them feedback about how they're implementing. Is this working? Is this not working? Most law firms provide zero feedback to the support team. Maybe they do it once a year in an annual review in an hour, maybe 2.5 hours. An annual review with all the shareholders absolutely dread and hate doing. It's probably the only feedback and coaching they may be providing to their support team. Maybe the only feedback and coaching you're receiving in your practice is from your partners or from your support staff. So if you don't have these three things lined up, change will not occur. David, anything you want to add to this before I move to the next slide?
No, not on this one. Well stated.
Okay, thank you. So we're probably about 5 minutes left in the webinar, and you might be scratching your head going, what's next for you? There's two things I want to talk to you briefly about. Number one is I want to talk to you about the Double Your Revenue workshop, which is really designed to take your practice 2 times what it's doing. And we've been teaching this workshop since, I believe, 2004, and we've had tremendous results with it. And then I want to talk to you for a few minutes about a practice diagnostic. If you're saying, look, double your revenue, I'm not ready for it, it sounds scary, it's too much, I may not be a good fit for it, then I'm going to recommend that you look at doing what we call a practice diagnostic. So the Double Your Revenue workshop is a 1-day workshop that's designed to have you think through what I call comfort traps in your practice. What are the 8 to 10 core areas that you can, which are strategic leverage points in your practice that you can improve. And at the end of the workshop, you're going to walk out with what we call a growth map, which is a 10-step action plan to help you grow your practice revenue. Now, it's a 1-day workshop. There's a pre-webinar. There's a couple of post-webinars, but we can get this done in 1 day. And the workshop is typically led by myself or my partner, Mark Powers. We have 2 dates for the workshop. The first one that we're doing this year is in Orlando, Florida. It is a $995 investment for the first attorney, and if you bring a second attorney or assistant, it's $795. The workshop lasts from 8:30 in the morning to 5 p.m., and we like to limit it to no more than 25 lawyers. Our experience is if we go above 25 lawyers, it gets very hard for the facilitator to work with everybody and coach everybody and support everybody, and it's really hard for people to get to know each other and learn from each other. So it's really difficult if we go above that number. So we like to keep it at 25 attorneys. Right now, we've got half the program for Orlando sold. So if you're interested in attending the Orlando program, then I would register. We'll send you, after the webinar, you'll receive a registration link which will be emailed to you automatically. So if you think you would like to do that, then I would absolutely jump on that. We also have some testimonials on our website and more information about the webinar, more information on the workshop on the website. Right now, we are a couple of days away from the end of the month, and we have an early bird registration. So if you want to do the workshop, you can get $100 off the Orlando workshop if you register by the end of January. Now, you may be saying, nah, this is not something I want to do. I don't want to spend a full day out of my practice. We can arrange to do what we call a practice diagnostic. And the practice diagnostic provides two key benefits. Number one, you'll work with a practice advisor on ways to improve your practice and what we consider the 4 key cornerstones to growth. Number one is client development and marketing. If you don't know how to do client development and marketing, you're not going to. Number 2 is time management. To grow your practice, we're going to have to improve your time management so you have room in your practice to implement some new habits, strategies, and procedures. Number 3 is staffing and managing a team. One of the big things that I've learned, especially among solo and small firms, is if you're not in a position to embrace learning how to manage and groom people, then your practice will cap out in revenue. Now, if you're in a position where you want to grow the practice, one of the key strategies to learn is not just marketing, but interestingly enough, how to manage, how to hire, how to train, how to groom these people. And that, in my experience, is one of the key secrets that most lawyers just ignore and don't understand. And then last thing is cash flow and profitability. Like, how are you doing cash flow and profitability? How do you stack up against your competitors? How do you stack up against your peers? What are you doing in these areas? And then the second thing that you get into practice diagnostic is what we call a DISC assessment. And this DISC assessment shows where you should focus your natural strengths and energies. So if it shows that you're a great speaker, then we should have your marketing program designed around your speaking. If you are a great one-on-one connector, then we should have a marketing program designed around one-on-one connecting. But this allows us to figure out where your natural strengths are so we can maximize those versus going against the grain of your personality. The investment for a practice diagnostic is $275. It's a token investment. And this includes the DISC assessment report. It's typically going to be a 1-hour teleconference with a practice advisor. In this case, since David is doing this webinar, David's going to be the point person for your practice diagnostic, which is just perfect because you've heard David. You have a great understanding of his marketing skill. If you want to sign up for a practice diagnostic, just email David directly. David at atticusonline.com.
That's right.
So, yeah, David, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would say everybody online also, if there's just questions, if you want to have a short conversation about what the diagnostic is, I'd be happy to get more in depth with you. So don't feel like you can only contact me to sign up for the practice diagnostic. I'm happy to answer any questions, talk about Atticus, different programs that may be a benefit to you. So my door is open. There's my email, phone number 678-403-4216. Feel free to contact me and be happy to talk with you.
David, could you give your phone number again? I'm sorry.
I will. I did say that fast. Area code 678-403-4216. If anybody wants to contact me, that's my office line.
Okay, terrific. Thank you, David. If you want more information about other programs that we do, feel free to hit our website at atticusonline.com. And then, of course, if you have a question, there's two methods to ask. One is to use the chat function on your GoToWebinar dashboard and send the message to Mike, and he will be happy to unmute your line so you can ask the question. Our only request is if you're going to want to remain anonymous, so people don't know who you are because you're worried about someone hearing you ask the question, let us know so Mike won't say your name. If you're not worried about that, then more likely we'll introduce you on the call. And of course, you can, secondly, to click a hand icon if you have a question or comment, and we'll call you so you can be heard. With that, if there's any questions, now would be the appropriate time to ask them. Michael, I'm going to give you a second to see if anybody pops up. If not, we'll do a closing comment or two and call it a day.
Yes, we do have a question. They would like David to repeat his phone number again. And I want to stress on David's email address to make sure you put in David P. at Atticus Online. But David, could you repeat your phone number again? And I'll include it in the follow-up message too.
Sure, be happy to. It's area code 678-403-4216.
Great. Also, I wanted to let everybody know when they were talking about the ABCD client matrix, that form is available on the dashboard under handouts, and you can download a PDF copy of that form there as well. There are no other questions or hands raised at this time. I will be sending out a follow-up message after this email within the next day that'll include a link to this presentation on our YouTube channel as well, so you can feel free to watch it if you missed part of it and had to step away, or if you got in a little bit late. We'll have the presentation up within the next day, and you'll receive a message from us with a link to that.
Terrific. Thank you, Mike. David, thank you for your time. Thank you, everyone, for your time, attention, attendance, and we look forward to talking to you in the future. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.